An aging handyman got a frantic call at 3 a.m. A little girl was trapped in a storm drain as a hurricane raged. He didn't hesitate. He crawled into the flooding tunnel to save her, but by sunrise, police had surrounded his house. And what they thought he did would shock the entire town. Hi everyone. Welcome to Feel More Stories. Let's get started. At 68, Ethan Sullivan wasn't just a handyman, he was Riverbend's quiet guardian. His hands, twisted from years of labor and creeping arthritis, still knew the language of wrenches and pliers better than most men half his age. For 45 years. Ethan had patched roofs, rewired homes, and fixed broken furnaces all over this sleepy Georgia town. But tonight, those same weathered hands trembled not from age, but from fear. He sat in his dimly lit kitchen, a steaming mug untouched beside him, staring at the bright red stamp on the tax notice. Final warning, property seizure in 21 days. The words scorched his memory like fire. Rain lashed against the windows of the modest home he once shared with his beloved wife. Charlotte, who'd passed after a long, brutal illness. Her medical bills had drained every cent he had. Outside, a storm raged, news radios blared. It was the worst in decades. Inside, the silence was louder. No ringing phone, no requests for work. Big city companies had replaced him long ago with fancy logos and touchscreens. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, Ethan's phone would ring and nothing in his life would ever be the same. The storm outside howled like a wild animal, shaking the windows of Ethan's old house with every violent gust. Thunder rolled through Riverbend as if the heavens themselves were cracking open. Then, at precisely 3:08 a.m., the rotary phone on Ethan's kitchen counter rang its shrill, unexpected buzz slicing through the silence like a blade. He nearly knocked over his chair getting to it. "Ethan Sullivan," he said, voice thick with sleep and disbelief. A woman's voice trembled on the other end, barely audible over the crashing wind. "Oh, thank God you answered. My name is Isabella Martinez. I got your number from Mrs. Harper at the gas station. I'm sorry to call so late, but I didn't know who else to turn to." Ethan's instincts kicked in. "What's wrong?" "My daughter Layla, she's only 7. She was playing near the storm drain behind our building this afternoon. She dropped a bracelet that belonged to her grandmother, and she tried to get it back. Now she's stuck. The water's rising. I called the fire department, but they said it'll be hours. I don't know what to do. She's terrified." Ethan's chest clenched. Images of Charlotte, their daughter who'd passed away young, flashed through his mind. Without hesitation, he reached for his boots. "Where are you?" "Cedar Pines Apartments, Building D." "Lady, don't worry about money or timing. Just keep talking to your girl. I'll be there in 15. Isabella began to cry. "But sir, I can't pay." "Did I ask you for a dime? Just give me the address again." Rain slammed down like fists as Ethan loaded his truck with his old tool bag. Driving was a nightmare, streets flooded. Visibility near zero, but he made it to the apartment complex. Isabella was waiting in the parking lot, soaked and shaking. "She's right down there." She pointed to the open drain, sobbing. "She keeps saying she's scared. I can't see her anymore." Ethan crouched near the opening, shining his flashlight into the dark concrete tunnel. A tiny voice echoed back. "Help, I'm cold." "There you are." "Sweet girl?" Ethan called, forcing calm into his voice. "I'm Ethan. I'm gonna get you out, but I need you to hang on a bit longer. Okay." The drain opening was too narrow for him to fit through. But Ethan had spent a lifetime crawling through these systems. He remembered this tunnel fed into a main access point behind the complex, one the city used for maintenance. Turning to Isabella, he said, "Keep her talking. I'll come from the main tunnel." As he disappeared into the downpour, One thought pounded in Ethan's heart: he would not let that child die tonight. The rain didn't let up. It was a torrential wall of water as Ethan Sullivan trudged through the flooded alley behind Cedar Pines apartments, boots sinking into mud and debris. His tool bag felt heavier than ever, strapped across his aching shoulders. But none of that mattered now. Not the water, not the cold, not even the searing pain in his lower back. A little girl was counting on him. He reached the main access point, a thick steel grate bolted shut and meant only for city workers. But Ethan had opened hundreds of these in his day. His fingers fumbled through the rain as he jammed his old crowbar into the rusted seam. With a painful creak and a splash of muddy water, the grate finally gave way. He dropped into the darkness. The tunnel was worse than he imagined, ankle-deep water rushing fast, walls slick with slime. His flashlight beam cut through the dark, guiding him forward. "Layla!" he shouted, voice echoing against the concrete. "I'm here," came a faint cry. Ethan pushed forward, heart thudding like a war drum. Each step was treacherous. His foot slipped once, sending him crashing into the wall. Pain shot through his knee, but he forced himself back up, leaning heavily on the tunnel's edge. Finally, after crawling through 2 junctions, he saw her. Layla, barely visible in the flickering beam, was pressed against the far wall, her eyes wide with fear. The water was now up to her waist. "I got it," she cried, holding up a soaked silver bracelet. "I found Grandma's bracelet." Even as the flood swirled around her, this child had clung to something that mattered. "That's real brave of you," Ethan called gently. "Now let's get you out, sweetheart." He waded closer, fighting the current, and scooped her into his arms. She was shivering violently, too weak to even hold on properly. He gripped her tight against his chest, shielding her from the cold as best he could. "Close your eyes," he whispered. "We're going home." Navigating back through the tunnel with Layla in his arms was brutal. His muscles screamed in protest. His knees threatened to give out. At one point, the current almost knocked them both down, but Ethan jammed his shoulder against the tunnel wall, anchoring himself until the surge passed. When he finally reached the access grate again, he used his elbow to bang against the side. Moments later, hands reached down. It was a neighbor, then another. Together, they pulled Layla to safety, then helped Ethan up. Isabella was sobbing uncontrollably as she wrapped her arms around her daughter. "You did it. You brought her back." Ethan collapsed against the side of the building, drenched, exhausted, but relieved beyond words. And just as he caught his breath, red and blue lights bathed the night. Police cars, fire trucks, an ambulance. He looked up, confused. That's when a cold dread crept in. This looked like a crime scene, and he was standing in the middle of it with a frightened, soaking wet child in his arms. "Sir, step away from the child." The words hit Ethan Sullivan like a punch to the gut. 2 officers had approached, hands near their belts, eyes narrowed under dripping hats. A paramedic gently took Layla from his arms, wrapping her in blankets as she sobbed and clung to her mother. Ethan began, chest heaving, soaked to the bone. "Are you Ethan Sullivan?" one officer asked, pulling out a small notebook. "Yes, but we got multiple 911 calls," the officer interrupted, "about a possible child abduction. Witnesses reported seeing an older man forcing a little girl into a storm drain." Ethan's heart sank. Of course it looked bad. Who else crawls into a flooded drain at 3 a.m. with a child? Before he could open his mouth to explain, Isabella stepped forward, holding Layla close. Her voice, though cracked with emotion, was fierce. "Officer, that man saved my daughter's life. She was trapped in that drain, and he risked everything to bring her back. I called him. I begged him to come." The officers paused. Behind them, Neighbors had begun to gather wet, worried, whispering. Then a voice rose from the crowd. "I know that man. He fixed my water heater during the ice storm 2 years ago. Wouldn't even take money." Another spoke up. "He repaired our roof for free when my husband lost his job. Stayed up there all night in the rain." More voices followed. "He crawled under my house when I was pregnant and scared to death of the gas leak. He rewired the community center's lights. Didn't charge a dime." One by one, people stepped forward, recalling moments when Ethan Sullivan, the old handyman no one noticed anymore, had shown up like a quiet guardian angel. The crowd grew. Even Mrs. Harper, the cashier who'd given Isabella his number, was there. "If you think Ethan's a criminal," she said loudly, "then this whole town's guilty of trusting the wrong people." The officer looked around, visibly overwhelmed. Then a young firefighter, Lieutenant Hayes, stepped out from the fire truck. "Wait, that's the guy who rescued Layla. You crawled through the storm system alone." Ethan nodded, still clutching his bruised ribs. "That's damn impressive," Hayes said with respect. "We've been trying to hire someone who understands this town's underground layout. Most of our guys couldn't navigate those tunnels without maps." He turned to the officers. "He's not a suspect. He's a damn hero." Ethan blinked, stunned. A moment ago, he was a suspect. Now, people were calling him a legend. Layla looked up from her blanket and whispered, "Mama says you're a hero." Ethan knelt beside her, adjusted the bracelet still loose on her wrist. "No, sweetheart. You are. You held on to hope when it mattered most." As the rain eased and the first rays of dawn broke through, Ethan realized something had changed forever. Not just how people saw him, but how he saw himself. 2 days later, Ethan Sullivan found himself in a place he never imagined he'd be, Mayor Carla Whitmore's office. He sat across from the polished oak desk, still feeling slightly out of place in his weathered flannel shirt and work boots, surrounded by city leaders in suits. The mayor smiled warmly. "Ethan, we owe you more than just thanks. What you did rescuing Layla in the middle of that storm was extraordinary." Ethan shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable with praise. "I just did what anyone with a wrench and a conscience would have done." "No, you didn't," the mayor said gently. "You did what almost no one else could have done. Our fire chief said you navigated the storm drain system like a city engineer." She slid a document across the desk. "Which is why we'd like to offer you an official position. Emergency Infrastructure Consultant for the City of Riverbend." Ethan's brows lifted. "Consultant. You'll be on call for critical infrastructure events, flooding, outages, tunnel inspections, flexible hours, strong pay, benefits." She paused, then added, "And the salary will more than cover your back taxes. In fact, we'll backdate it to the day of the rescue." Ethan stared at the offer in disbelief. "Riverbend needs people like you, Mr. Sullivan," the mayor said. "People who know this town and care about it." Still dazed, Ethan left City Hall that afternoon and headed home. But what greeted him in his driveway stopped him cold. Nearly a dozen trucks were parked outside branded vans, pickup trucks with ladders, toolboxes, and company names from all over 3 surrounding counties. Standing at the center of it all was Tommy Briggs, owner of Riverbend Plumbing. "About time you got home," he called with a grin. Ethan stepped out of his truck. "What is all this?" Tommy walked up and clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Payback. Old man. The good kind. We heard about the taxes, and more importantly, what you did for that little girl. Every one of us has a story about you helping us out back when we were nobodies." An electrician Ethan had mentored years ago chimed in. "You loaned me my first drill set when I couldn't afford one. Taught me how to bid jobs fair. Sent customers my way when you were booked." Tommy nodded toward the house. "We took up a collection. paid off the tax bill. And we're staying until this house is better than new. Ethan's throat tightened. I can't let you. Too late? Tommy smirked. Payment already sent to the city. Now shut up and let us work. Over the next week, Ethan's modest home transformed. The roof was replaced. The electrical system was brought up to code. Leaky pipes were swapped for brand new lines. They even repaved the driveway. Every nail driven. Every shingle laid done by people he'd once helped. When Ethan tried to object, one young plumber just smiled and said, 40 years of kindness? Mr. Sullivan, this is just the interest paying you back. For the first time in years, Ethan Sullivan woke up without pain in his back or a leak in the ceiling. Sunlight poured through windows that finally opened and shut like they were supposed to. The old floor didn't creak under his feet. The new roof didn't groan when the wind blew. And his heart, it felt a little lighter, too. Outside, the hum of drills and saws continued. The volunteer crew had turned into a kind of brotherhood, a rotating team of workers and apprentices who refused to stop until Ethan's home was perfect. Some were men he'd trained back in the 90s. Others were sons of those men. One even brought his teenage daughter Jenna to help paint the porch. She said she wanted to learn from the legend. Ethan never saw himself as one. He was just a man who showed up when a pipe burst or a heater went cold. But now, he realized something important. Those quiet acts of help had mattered. They'd added up to something bigger than he'd ever imagined. Every day, Isabella and Layla stopped by, bearing sandwiches, coffee, and hugs. Layla had declared herself Ethan's official assistant, and no one dared argue. She followed him around with a tiny pink tool belt, asking questions, handing him nails, telling every visitor that Mr. Ethan saved my life. One afternoon, she caught Ethan staring at her wrist, the silver bracelet, now clean and polished, still slightly too big for her. I never take it off, she said proudly. It's from my grandma, but it reminds me of you, too. Ethan smiled, eyes misting. You're braver than most grown men I've met. Layla. She beamed. You're my hero. No, he said gently, crouching to her level. Heroes don't wear capes or swing hammers. They hold on even when it's scary. That was you. That evening, long after the last crew truck pulled away, Ethan stood alone in his workshop. Tools that once belonged to his father hung on the wall. The bench where he'd taught young apprentices sat freshly sanded. The room was filled with quiet memories, and for the first time since Charlotte passed, he let himself feel everything: the sorrow, the gratitude, the healing. He cried, not because of pain, but because of the overwhelming grace of it all, of being seen, of being remembered. The next morning, his rotary phone rang again. Another job, another family in need, another moment to show up. But now, something was different. Ethan wasn't just Riverbend's handyman anymore. He was a symbol, a reminder that kindness still matters, that showing up, quietly, again and again, creates ripples you don't see until they come back as a wave. And in that wave, Ethan Sullivan had found a new beginning. It was nearly sunset when Ethan Sullivan stepped into his freshly renovated kitchen. The scent of wood polish and new paint still lingered. On the wall, where the tax notice used to hang, there was now a framed photo, a candid shot taken by a neighbor, Ethan, soaking wet, carrying Layla out of the storm drain, light bouncing off the silver bracelet in her tiny hand. Just beneath it, someone had added a hand-lettered quote in a wood frame: "Real heroes don't wear capes, they carry tool bags." The old rotary phone rang. Ethan Sullivan. He answered with his usual gruffness. though the edges of his voice had softened in recent days. A flustered voice replied, "Mr. Sullivan, this is Jennifer Walsh. My water heater just quit and I've got 15 people coming for my daughter's wedding tomorrow. Mrs. Harper said you're the only one who can work miracles." Ethan chuckled. "I'm a little backed up these days. Mrs. Walsh, might be a week or two." "Oh," she said, clearly deflated. "But—" Ethan paused, grabbing his tool bag with a grin. "For a bride and a busted heater, I'll be right over." As he loaded up the truck, a familiar voice called out, "Another emergency." It was Isabella, smiling from her front porch. "Always is," Ethan replied with a wink. Layla, playing with sidewalk chalk in the driveway, ran over and hugged his leg. "Are you going to be a hero again?" "Mr. Ethan." He knelt, adjusting the silver bracelet on her wrist like he had so many times before. "Sweetheart, heroes don't plan to be heroes. They just show up when someone needs them." And that was the truth of it. Ethan had never set out to be anything special. He hadn't chased medals or title. He just fixed what was broken, leaky pipes, broken doors, scared hearts. But somewhere between all those repairs, he had built something far greater, a legacy of trust, resilience, and quiet heroism. Now, people called him before they called the city. Young contractors came for advice. Neighbors brought him pies, coffees, or just stopped by to say thank you. His phone never stopped ringing, but that was okay. He didn't need fame, he didn't need fortune. He just needed that sound, the ring of someone in need, and the chance to help. As he drove toward Mrs. Walsh's house, the last light of the sun caught on Layla's bracelet in his rearview mirror. A new generation was growing up, learning what it meant to be brave, to be kind, to be steady in a world full of storms. And thanks to Ethan Sullivan, they now knew exactly who to call. Heroism isn't measured by glory, muscle, or the spotlight. It's defined by presence, by being there when no one else will. Ethan Sullivan didn't wear a uniform or command a battalion. He carried a tool bag and a heart full of grit. In a world that often rewards noise and spectacle, he reminded us of the quiet power in simply showing up. You don't need special skills to be a hero in someone's story. Maybe it's checking on your elderly neighbor, fixing a leaky faucet for a struggling single mom, mentoring a young person, really listening when someone needs to talk. Every act of service ripples. What feels small to you might be unforgettable to someone else. Take a page from Ethan's book. Keep showing up. Keep helping. Don't wait for a reward. Just do it because it's the right thing. One day, when life throws you into a storm, you'll be amazed at how many people remember your kindness and rush to return it. Because kindness, like Ethan's tools, never goes out of style. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring true-life tales. Drop a comment below if you've ever experienced a moment when someone showed up for you in a time of need. Let's celebrate real heroes together.